Hi, I'm Bob Pyle from Baltimore, Maryland. Rolph Scarlett was one of America's great abstract artists and did colorful abstract paintings for nearly 75 years. Many of his works are owned by the Guggenheim Museum in New York. This is my living room in Ellicott City, Maryland. As you can see, I collect many different types of abstract art, modern furniture, psychedelic, and even space age too. But I gave it all up to collect the great artwork of Rolph Scarlett. Rolph Scarlett was a famous artist in the 1940s. Later, he became virtually unknown when styles changed. But lately, he's becoming very well known once again. In this film, we'll meet some people who knew Rolph Scarlett personally. Also, some collectors, dealers, and just plain Rolph Scarlett fanatics.
I'm Ron Balsamo, and I'm a Rolph Scarlett fanatic. We have to take a look at this painting. This is a Rolph Scarlett painting, probably done in the late 40s, early 50s.
Hello, I'm Harriet Tannen. I'm an artist who lives in Woodstock, New York. One of my first teachers was Rolph Scarlett. I wrote a book about him. The name of this book is The Baroness, the Mogul, and the Forgotten History of the First Guggenheim Museum.
There's a precisionism and a cosmic feeling in his work that just really draws people to him and really touches something deep in their soul. And so many of my collectors have gone on to buy 1, 2, or as many as 30 or 40 Rolph Scarletts.
My stepfather was Rolph Scarlett. He married my mother when I was about 6. He was always working or doing something or making jewelry or he used to say, "It's too bad you have to eat, we should just have pills." And my mother would have been horrified by that.
I just can't see anyone else doing this type of image. And that, for me, when I see a Scarlett, I don't even look at the signature. I look at the picture first.
You know, I never met Rolph Scarlett, but I know a lot of people who have met him and knew him very well. And people said you would have loved the guy. You would have loved Rolph Scarlett.
This book is the memoirs of Rolph Scarlett as told to and written down by Harriet Tannen. It concerns the old Guggenheim Museum where even Jackson Pollock was employed.
The Guggenheim was founded on that geometric painting was the purest form of painting, and anything that was not geometric, the Baroness Rebay would not allow into the museum for any show. So for 15 years, until Guggenheim died, it was all non-objective art. There was Kandinsky and Bauer and Rolph Scarlett. He was the only American at the time, but in the early museum, New York was not recognized as an art center. The names were not known then, and Rolph's name was more known than others.
When the Baroness Hilary Bay of the Guggenheim discovered Scarlett, she thought of him as the American Kandinsky. As the first director of the Guggenheim Museum, she was very proud personally that she discovered Scarlett, and she knew that he had the most promise of any non-objective artist in the United States.
I worked at the Guggenheim Museum when it was still on 54th Street. Hilary Bay, the Baroness. She was a real character. She swept in and out. She would arrive at the museum and instantly everybody would notify everybody else so that they were doing what they were supposed to do.
Irene, Saul's wife, had 2 rooms in the museum. The Rebay wanted to show the world that this was bad art. And so people could go in to see the bad art. And she had Picasso in there. She had really well-known artists, but that was the bad art of the time. Of course, time was to prove otherwise.
There's a Rolph Scarlett show at the Pennsylvania Art Conservatory in Philadelphia. Let's take a look at some more works by Rolph Scarlett.
My name's Tom Duffy, and I'm the director of the Pennsylvania Art Conservatory's Center City location in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The current exhibition is called Non-Objective Paintings, 20th Century American Abstracts. We're receiving a lot of visitors that have traveled to the show all the way down from New York and upstate New York, as well as down from DC. Folks have come to see the show. The piece behind me is titled Colossus, and it certainly lives up to its name. It is a large canvas, but also the way it is painted is put together beautifully with strong, vibrant colors. There's a lot of layers of colors happening on top. There's hard edge, there's soft edge, there's blending, there's dynamic lines happening with the blacks and then the high heat sort of colors. It has certainly been the centerpiece of this exhibition. What I like about his work is how he works with color. He's a true colorist in every sense of the word. The works that you see here, specifically by Rolph Scarlett, are some of the works dating back to the 1920s, 1930s, 40s, and 50s, where he's experimenting, one of the first American pioneers to let go of anything that is representational, anything that resembles an object or a person or a landscape. And he's just truly exploring color, line, and form, and composition, and in creating these beautiful little masterpieces, or as if you will, I'll use Rolph Scarlett's term, little symphonies.
Who was the man behind the paintings? Let's find out a little bit about Scarlett's personality.
First of all, he was tall. I think he was about 6'4" to 6'6", so he had a real imposing physical presence. But what I hear about him is that his personality was so vibrant. He was a great storyteller. He would get together with people and he would mesmerize you by his incredible stories and his very kind of, I think, high energy, imaginative, just engaging personality.
Well, one time I had invited a school friend home, and I told him to be quiet, which he was never, but he was. And in the middle of lunch, I suddenly said, "Daddy, be funny." He had twinkling eyes, and he was just always creatively thinking. He was off in another world.
I'm the Scarlett's next door neighbor, but he was a very interesting person to visit with. He could talk on any subject, well versed. One day I had rhubarb. I had an extra supply and I took some over to them. And he says, "Do you know what kind of rhubarb that is?" I said, "I don't have a clue. I only know it's very tasty and very good." And he told me that it was called strawberry rhubarb.
He didn't mind being interrupted, and he could work under any and all conditions almost.
I took this picture in the 1970s when he was in his early 80s. He really looks great here. To describe it, he wrote, "Harriet, you are a rip snorting kid, and I'm for you, Rolph Scarlett."
If you went into the studio and wanted to see something, you might get into a conversation. He might show you 5 paintings and 6 drawings, and you would respond. That was wonderful. He loved music. Even when he was painting, he often had the radio on. It was classical music he listened to.
His wife, Emily, was a charming person. She liked people. She liked to mingle in the community. She loved her flowers.
Scarlett worked in so many different styles. He worked in, of course, the geometric. He worked as an abstract expressionist, doing gestural, lyrical work and throwing paint. He did biomorphic paintings. He did traditional landscape painting. He worked in crazy, surrealist, figurative, he had a figurative period where he did, wild, crazy, figures doing all kinds of things. He did stage designs and jewelry designs.
Scarlett could paint in any style. Look at this, a geometric on one side, and look at that, Scarlett. Self-portrait done by Rolph Scarlett.
Sometimes we didn't know where the style came in because he painted in so many different ways.
Well, when I look at paintings, if I really like it, I sort of put myself into the work somehow.
Look how complicated that is. I don't think anyone could do that. And not only that, Scarlett, if he had a good piece of paper, he'd like to use it as much as he can. And look at that. He has another drawing on the other side. So this is two Scarletts in one.
I prefer landscape, and he didn't do landscape. He did geometric paintings, colorful, pleasant. They looked nice on a big wall. They harmonized with modern decor.
For Scarlett, everything is color. This is his palette, true to form. Drip, drip, drip. A drip painting by Scarlett.
Rolph Scarlett began his career as a jewelry maker.
Scarlett made jewelry all his life, from beginning to end, in silver and gold. He set them with stones, but this is a gold piece he specifically made for Hilary Bay. He was very inventive with the pieces. They could come apart, they could go together. It's this way, or in the original position.
I'm going to show you Rolph Scarlett's method for making a geometric painting as shown to me by his student Harriet Tannen. Scarlett used 5 geometric symbols: the square, the circle, the triangle, the rectangle, and the half circle. Then he would decide how many of each symbol he would use in his painting. Sometimes this was random. I'm going to say 10 squares, 12 circles, 8 triangles, 4 rectangles, and 2 half circles. Here's a drawing I did using 16 circles. Here they are. 10 squares, there at the bottom. 8 triangles, here they are. 20 rectangles, they go across and up and down to crisscross. And 8 half circles, there at the bottom. Scarlett used a compass or circle stencil and a ruler to make the symbols look good. After coloring it in with acrylic or gouache paint, here's the result. You can try this at home. In fact, here's another one, here's another one, and here's another one. When Scarlett finished a small painting he really liked, he put a series of lines on it to make a grid and numbered them, so he could turn it into a large oil painting.
It tells me exactly how Scarlett did his work. He probably did a small picture of this image, and then by using the grid, he transferred the image sort of like exactly where it would be in the painting from the small one to the big one by putting these grids, and he numbered everything.
I've been waiting for months for the big Rolph Scarlett art show at the Fletcher Gallery in Woodstock, New York. Let's head up to Woodstock, New York and check it out. Only 8 more miles to Woodstock. Here we are at the Woodstock Flea Market.
I got a hot rod Ford and it's $1 bill. I know a spot right over the hill. I need a drink and the gas is free. Won't you all come along with me? I say, hey,
Hi, what's your name?
my name's Abby Graber,
Did you know anyone that was at the Woodstock Festival in '69?
and I know my two brothers went. My two older brothers went. They were too stoned to tell much about the story.
Peter Gabriel, Bob Dylan, Bob Weir.
Here we are at the Fletcher Gallery. Let's go inside and see the big Rolph Scarlett show.
I had gotten Megan one, but there was more of the
Yeah,
geometric. But I love these.
these are good. This one is,
I like this one too.
Hi, my name is Tom Fletcher from Woodstock, New York, and I'm the owner of Fletcher Gallery here. And starting with number one, we have a geometric abstraction, circa 1940s. A typical example of his work where the geometric forms are floating in space, done wash on heavy paper. Wash is a heavy, opaque, watercolor type material, and that was a very common medium that Rolph Scarlett used when he worked in paper. 3 is a beautiful fusion between abstraction and drip painting. At this time that this piece was executed, circa 1950, Rolph Scarlett was working, he was on the staff of the Guggenheim Museum, and one of his associates was Jackson Pollock. Scarlett did many drip paintings on canvas and also on paper. He's using bright colors, outlining forms with ink, and then filling them in with brightly accented wash. This is a beautiful example of one of his stage designs, circa 1925. In the late 20s and early 30s, Scarlett did a lot of experimentation with abstraction. As a matter of fact, he was coined the American Kandinsky. Yeah. This is a really stunning example of his geometric abstraction of mid-40s. This is really the style of work that Scarlett was most known for, and really the kind of work that's most sought after by collectors of Rolph Scarlett. And that's his pure geometric abstraction, using geometric shapes that he puts together to compose a composition.
I love what he's put together, whether it's the colors or the form or the movement.
This next piece in the exhibition is a really fantastic example of his drip painting. Again, mid-century, circa 1950, he was with Jackson Pollock at the time at the Guggenheim and began doing these amazing drip paintings. I think that Scarlett probably did, at least between 100 and 150 drip paintings in this period. This particular piece reminds a lot of people of almost like stained glass to produce a really vibrant, powerful example of his work. It's interesting to note that Scarlett worked just as successfully very, very small as he did very, very big. He produced pieces that were of fantastic precision, 1 inch square, and also 6 or 8 feet by 6 or 8 feet, so he could work both big and small. This would be considered the smaller, almost a study, and then he later produced a large oil, 50 by 50 inches. Quite frequently you have 2 pieces at different sizes during the 60s and 1970s. And this is a wonderful example of composition of that type from this period. This is a beautiful example of geometric work, mid-century, circa 1950. Beautiful color, also on paper, and but a very large size. Scarlett generally didn't work too much larger than this on paper. Be sure to come to Woodstock and right on Main Street, stop in and say hello at the Fletcher Gallery.
This is the Woodstock Artists Cemetery. This is where the artists from Woodstock are buried. And Harriet Tannen told me that Rolph Scarlett is also buried here. Let me see if I can find where that is. Here it is, the grave site of Rolph Scarlett. It says Rolph Scarlett, 1889 to 1984, and his wife Emily Smith Scarlett, 1891 to 1986. This grave site is off to the side of the cemetery, sort of by itself, just like Rolph Scarlett would have wanted it. The Rolph Scarlett estate contained hundreds or even thousands of paintings. Let's take a look at this, as well as the many different signatures he used.
There were hundreds and hundreds of paintings.
I looked up, and I was in this garage type barn, and I looked up and I saw hundreds, if not over 1,000 paintings stored in all different cross beams. And I said, what is this? You know, and Elizabeth said to me, oh, that's my father's artwork. And I said, who is he? And she said, oh, it's Rolph Scarlett.
Well, it's really Harriet Tannen who took over. I mean, started getting, because she got a good gallery in New York. He wasn't that good at trying to push himself, and he was not part of a group at all of artists.
In his 80s, I was having him sign the paintings and the drawings, and he wasn't always in great shape. His signature wasn't always good. So if I found that the signature wasn't as good as I wanted, I had him sign the back of the work. If his signature was acceptable, then he signed the front of the work. And it took us quite a while.
The S has a little bit of swirl to it. The A is flat. The C has a little curl on the top of it, which he normally adds a little script to his signature. And then the L comes up to the E on the bottom, and then the T's, one is higher than the other, and then he finishes off with a period. When I look at this signature, I date it 1938, or prior to 1938, simply because he changed his name to simply Scarlett after he met Hilary Bay, and he went into this arrangement with the Guggenheim.
Rolph Scarlett certainly did some beautiful artwork, and his paintings are becoming more and more in demand.
It's been estimated that Scarlett may have produced upwards of 20,000 works. It's just been plain for everybody to see that over the last 5 years, let's say, Scarlett's prices have just risen. So how high they're going to go, I can't say. I think that they're going to continue to rise, and serious quality examples of his work, I believe, have strong investment potential.
Rolph Scarlett is a great investment as an artist. His prices are still, for certain pieces of artwork and good artwork, are below $1,000.
Rolph Scarlett lived to be 96. The last year or two he was in a hospital. When he got bedridden, he used to lie there and think of everything and sing the old songs of his youth. He was never bored. I mean, he knew how to entertain himself, put it that way.
He was a lot of fun to be with. He was always on the up and up. He was always happy, telling stories, singing, doing whatever came to mind.
Look at this piece of artwork. At first glance it looks like nothing, but when you examine it, it's quite interesting. It's painted on a paper bag, and not only a brown paper bag, but it's the remnant piece of a paper bag. This is the seam of the paper bag, and owning this piece, I think about what piece of artwork did he do on the good piece of the paper bag.
You know, if you had asked me if the Guggenheim Museum was going to be displaying any of the work, I would have said no 25, 30 years ago. But today, putting up other shows, they usually have some of the Scarletts in the show too. Scarlett loved that he was going to be famous again. Every time a gallery gave him a show while he was still alive, he was beyond happy. It was fabulous.
I'm a Scarlett fanatic. I have Scarletts everywhere. I've never seen him do a painting this size that is so beautiful.
It's true. In Woodstock, we have a 12-step program, Rolph Scarlett Anonymous. For people, anybody that's bought over 10 of his works is an honorary member.